Welcome to the Payments Leaders Summit podcast, where the brightest minds and trailblazers in the payments industry come together to share insights, strategies, and the latest innovations shaping the future of finance.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here, Laura. Thanks for the invitation. So my name's Adam Gagan. I head up global government affairs for Revolut. So we essentially engage with policymakers, with central banks around the world to try and get good regulation, which is hopefully good for consumers, innovation, competition, and all of that.
Perfect. So kicking off, a lot of people would say that here in the UK, the take-up of account-to-account payments, of open banking, has been slower than elsewhere in the world. If we look at, the Netherlands with Ideal, if we look at VIPs in Scandinavia, for example, both of these examples have kind of a single brand identity, a single brand mark. What would you say is needed here in the UK to really drive A2A payments for merchants and the consumers?
So I think the UK actually has done quite well when it comes to account. We don't have a big scaled scheme like a UPI or a PIX or an Ideal, but the infrastructure, the APIs, the system works actually very well here in the UK. Even as Revolut, one of the big drivers of our own growth has been people making sort of account-to-account payments when they're topping up essentially their wallet or their account with us. So that's, I think, been something we need to recognize. UK's done well. What do we need to take a step further, I think, is still a big question mark that potentially will be answered in the next few weeks when the government publishes its national payments vision. Clearly, there's sort of two big routes you could go. One is to embrace essentially the industry and to find a way that they can commercially develop new schemes. So there's work being done on a commercial variable recurring payment system. The other would be to essentially have a more government interventionist approach, more like building a UPI or a PIX. We'll see what happens. My money's probably a little bit more on the former, just given where we are. But I think things will move, things will change here in the UK. And again, account to account is one new innovation. There's stable coins, there's CBDCs. There's a lot happening in this space.
Brilliant. And another very topical question. So we're a week into the PSR's new APP reimbursement policy. Given the kind of increased prevalence of this type of scams, this type of fraud, how is Revolut balancing reactive measures, such as customer reimbursements and case investigations, with proactive strategies like fraud prevention tools and customer education?
So great question. And essentially the answer is quite simple, which is you have to do it all. You have to have a really comprehensive approach to stopping and preventing fraud, and obviously for looking after customers if and when it does happen. I think the UK's regime is really kind of a precedent-setting one globally. I think there's a lot of good things that are going to come out of it. A lot of consumers are going to have increased protections. There's still probably going to be some challenges in the full implementation and making sure that it's working effectively. But fundamentally, it's something that we have invested significantly in, not just in terms of making sure that customers have those protections, but again, that hopefully they're prevented from getting scammed in the first place. So we do things like educational engagement with our customers to highlight the types of scams in the market. When people are trying to make a payment, we dynamically intervene to ask them questions about why they're making it, who they're making it to, and really trying to break almost the spell of the scammer we like to talk about by making them really stop and think and hopefully make a good decision. And again, in some situations, we'll pause payments, we'll hold payments, we'll really kind of stop that process when we see it as really a high risk of fraud. I think I am really proud actually of what Revolut's done in that space. I think a lot of other banks are really investing too. I think the challenge is this problem can't be solved just by the banking industry. It really needs to be solved further upstream where these scammers are first getting in contact with essentially some of the customers. Our stats, and I think they're quite similar to the industry, show around about sort of 70% or so of all of the scam attacks that we're seeing, for example, here in the UK, are largely being driven off social media engagement from scammers to people. Sometimes that's paid advertisements, sometimes that's things like a marketplace. In the end, we need to really do much more activity and attention there to try and suppress and stop those scams. There's even some discussion, I think, about shifting some liability on reimbursing victims to, again, some of those big tech providers. And I think the PSR Home Office are discussing that. I don't know exactly what the final solution will be, but I think that's really got to be this next step we take in the UK. The APP reimbursement is a great first step to protect consumers. We need to, though, really now focus on preventing the scams in the first place, and that means getting everyone involved.
And you've already kind of covered this in some of those areas, but what are the kind of other key places where Revolut, as a business, as one of the largest kind of neobanks, challenger banks, is really driving innovation through the payments industry?
So I think there's a lot happening in payments. I think we have a couple of things that we're excited about. One is something called Revolut Pay, which is actually kind of an all-in-one solution for payments, whether in person or on websites. This essentially enables people to make card payments, and then if they're a Revolut customer, to also make a Revolut Pay transaction. And so that essentially means that we can provide essentially the money to the merchant at a lower cost than if they were using essentially a card payment. This is really great for the merchants because it makes it faster, cheaper. It's really great for customers as well because the authentication and some of the controls we can put can be even higher than we would have in other areas. And so I think that's the kind of innovation that really excites me, that we're really pushing. And again, at some point, we're going to see stable coins, we're going to see CBDCs. From our point of view, whatever is going to bring new value to our customers, again, whether that's a merchant, a business, our consumers, that's what is I think, going to drive our action in the space.
Perfect. And then finally, what's your kind of Mystic Mayor crystal ball prediction for the future of payments?
So what's going to change? I think actually disruption is going to accelerate. We have stable coins, we have CBDCs, we have potentially big moves with open finance, maybe also some new activations with more AI kind of tools being used by consumers to manage their money. You put all of that together, the world's probably not going to look like it does today in 10 years' time. And in our point of view, the way to navigate that as a business is to really focus on the customer. What are you doing to create new value for them? How are you using technology to offer something additional to what is existing today? And it's not just about shaving a few basis points here and there. It's really about transforming the experience and offering some new value that didn't exist before. And so that's, I think, what I'm really excited about. I think the change is going to accelerate and we'll see what we're talking about in 5 years' time.
Yeah, definitely. We heard yesterday that there's been more change in the last 5 years probably than the last 25 years in payments. So a lot's happening in the space at the moment.
Yeah, makes sense.
Perfect. And then finally, another kind of fun, different question. If you could apply buy now, pay later to any other aspect of your life other than payments, what would that be?
Can you explain the question more? That's an interesting question.
So, for an example, if you could do something now and have face the consequences later, what would that be? So my response and Harris and my colleague's response was both the exact same. It would be eat now and then think about that weight gain, the consequences later on. Someone else has said, like run a marathon tomorrow and think about the pain of the marathon later on.
Yeah. That's a difficult question for me to answer. I guess I have kids. I have 2 kids, a third one on the way. So probably something around being able to, have these wonderful years with them now and not always necessarily having to be the tough dad and just enjoying the fun while making sure that they learn all the right strict rules that they need to learn at some point in the future.
Perfect. That's a great example.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you.